All right. Been a while. Been a long while since the gang was together. So I thank everybody and I thank everyone for bearing with me until we got back onto a regular schedule. Summers are as summers are. But now it's Elul and we can start again. So we've made it all the way up to what the Koran edition calls Parak Beis. The original edition isn't divided into parakim; it's only divided into paragraphs. But the Koran edition has divided it up into parakim, which I think is sort of helpful. Um, so we're up to Parak Beis, that's paragraph Yud Gimel, which begins on page 2425. And we'll try to begin getting into this now. I have to admit, I have zero confidence that I'm going to do any adequate job of trying to parse this and explain what he's talking about here. But I'm going to try, and we'll see what happens. So thus far, in the last several paragraphs, and we spent two shiurim on this, we sort of talked about the idea of klipos, the idea of the impression or the appearance of the absence of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the absence of a revelation of God's presence, which the Baal HaSulam explained to us in his view is really just a function of the fact that there are two sort of mechanisms through which reality is created. One is the mechanism or the system of kedusha. The other is the system of tumah. The system of kedusha is just a direct reflection of the atzmos and the midah of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, which is ratzon lahashbos. Right, so we have an entire system of olamos, of realities, of states of consciousness, of awarenesses, where the Ratzon Hashem is filtered down into ultimately a physical space, and that Ratzon, that expression of godliness, is constantly expressing itself as giving, as expressed giving, as Ratzon Lahashbos. And in contrast to that, we have another complete and total system of all of the olamos and all of the spheros and partsufim and so on and so forth, of all realities and consciousnesses and expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But from this other, God has taken out the Ratzon Lahashbo, so to speak, and is manifesting only a Ratzon Lakabel La'atzmo. Self-interest, self-preservation, selfishness, etc., etc. I want, give me, and I'm going to take without giving back. That entire system, is the system of klipa, is the system of tuma. And these two systems operate side by side, one expressing the midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Ratzon Lahashbos, the other expressing the absence of that midah, which is perforce tuma and klipa, and God's will filters all the way down until it creates our olam hazeh, where you have body and spirit coexisting. You have physical reality and spiritual reality. You have God existing and manifesting within a physical reality defined by a Ratzon Lakabel. And that's the reality in which we find ourselves existing. And the whole point of everything is that we gradually, as we acquire a Ratzon Lahashbos, we gradually transform our Ratzon Lakabel La'atzmo into a Ratzon Lakabel Almanas Lahashbos, which makes us very much aligned with the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because really HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also a Ratzon Lakabel Almanas Lahashbos. God is receiving from us, so to speak, all in order for him to be able to give us the greatest experience of connection with him by being like him. All right, so he's effectively receiving something, right? The Torah says many times, right, that we bring a carbon and it's reach nichach la'Hashem. This from talk all over the place about how the mitzvahs that we do are lasos nachas ruach liyotzro, that we're trying to give something back, so to speak. But it's clear in the Baal HaSulam system that when we do what we're supposed to do, when we are becoming more God-like and transforming our Ratzon Lakabel into a Ratzon Lakabel al Manas Lahashbos. We're becoming givers as opposed to takers, and therefore becoming more God-like. What is happening is we're offering something to God, so to speak. Because within the system created by, within the system that exists within the expression of the Or Ein Sof, what we have is a HaKadosh Baruch Hu that needs us to be like him so that he can be good to us. That's the best way to be good to us, is by us becoming like him. And he has a need, so to speak, to be good to us. That's the purpose of creation. God decides, I'm going to create because I must be good. Chok hatov lahetiv. Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu lahetiv l'nivra. If God wants to be good to us, how can God express and give us goodness? Only by us becoming like him. That's the ultimate goodness. And so how do we become like him? And when we become like him, rather, we are giving something to him. So God really is effectively functioning within a mechanism of Ratzon Lakabel al Manas Lahashbos. He's receiving something from us in order to be able to give goodness to us. And so our ultimate transformation, our ultimate devekus of the halachta b'drachav and being like him, is by also transforming our Ratzon Lakabel not into a Ratzon Lahashbos. That's an initial stage where, to use Chabad terminology, that would be a stage of iskafia, right? Where I'm taking my Ratzon Lakabel and I'm suppressing it. I'm beating it down, and I'm going to take my Ratzon Lakabel. I'm going to take all my self-interest and I'm going to put it away. I'm going to make myself into a little nothing, and I don't need anything, and I don't count, and I'm just going to give. That happens, but that's only an intermediary stage, because the highest stage, the most godlike stage, is to say, no, I'm something, and I too need, and I too will receive, and I too will take, but I'm doing all of that only in order to provide and to give. Right? This, I think, is very important, just like in a bigger picture. Like, the ideal is not to never need. The ideal is not to be needless, or to be totally selfless and totally self-nullifying, etc., etc. Bittul is not self-negation. Bittul is self-transcendence. I am still a self, but I'm not only a self. I'm a self that exists in order to be a vehicle for giving. We have this. I'll just be explicit about the point. I think we have this in every relationship we ever encounter in our lives, where, as parents, as spouses, as partners, as employees or employers, etc., we can find ourselves in positions where we think to ourselves, "Oh, taking is selfish. I'm here to give to my loved ones. I'm here to give back to my employer. I'm here to give back to my employee. Taking is selfish. And therefore, I'm going to make myself a giver, and I'm going to throw away my taking." Or as members of a community, or whatever it happens to be, or in a relationship with a teacher or a rav, etc., I'm here to give to you. I'm here to give. That's a high realization of who I'm supposed to be. But really, what that turns into, number one, is we neglect our own needs and we turn ourselves into nothing. And the Baal HaSulam is actually telling us that's not godlike at all. Even HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol, within, like, the expression, right, not the actual atzmos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, but within the expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is the system of the Or Ein Sof that we're familiar with, God too is a self, again, so to speak, that needs something from us, wants that thing from us, not because God is egotistical, selfish, and needy, but because God wants to give to us, but can only give to us through our giving to him, so that God has something to give back to us, or a mechanism through which to give. And so we too, when we want to be givers, I want to give to my kids, I want to give to my spouse, I want to give to my community, etc., I have needs, and those also have to be met. Not because I am important and my needs need meeting, but because I can only give if my needs are met. I only have what to give if my own cup is full. I have to put my mask on first, and when my mask is on, I can help everyone else put their mask on. That's fundamental to what the Baal HaSulam is telling us here, and that's where we're holding right now. So that's the point of the system. We start with a Ratzon Lakabel. That Ratzon Lakabel comes from the system of Tumah. It's an expression of the system of Tumah and Klipa. And why is it a function of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How is it that Tumah and Klipa can come from God? Because Tumah and Klipa are a necessary step to achieving godliness, to achieving Hishtavos HaTzur with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because part of the Tzur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Ratzon Lakabel. It's Ratzon Lakabel only al Manas Lahashbos. not for selfish reasons, but in order to give and to express and to be good to others, but it's still there. And so the existence of that, the experience of transforming the Ratzon L'Kabel into a Ratzon L'Kabel Amanas Lahashbos is a necessary component of Hishtavas Atzur, which is a necessary component of fulfilling the entire machshava of the Bria and the Tachlis Achron, which is for God to now be able to give good to us. And so it has to be there, and it's not contrary to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's part of the system that actually fulfills the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the expression of that Ratzon. Okay? So that's where we were explaining, that's where we made it to explaining how it is that Klipa is part of the system, part of the unity of the system, part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How is Klipa, Ratzon L'Kabel, etc., part of this system? That brings us to Perek Beis. Yud Gimel. Amna. Now, however, now that we've said all of this, Adayin Nishar Lanu Lahavin, we still have to understand, sof, Kevan Sha'aratzon L'Kabel La'atzmo Hu Kol Kach Pagum Umukulko, since this Ratzon L'Kabel for oneself, this desire, this will, this interest in receiving for oneself, not in order to give to others, but in order to just receive for ourselves, which the Baal HaSulam identified with for us as the Yetzer Hara that we have for the first 12, 13 years of our lives exclusively. We're just self-interested animals for the first 12, 13 years of our lives. It's only when our prefrontal cortex starts to, right, we're just amygdala lizards for 13 years, and then our prefrontal cortex starts to develop, and now we have higher reasoning, higher thinking. We can think about more than just me. We have that for 13 years. That's the idea. The Gemara says that the Yetzer Hara precedes the Yetzer Tov by 13 years. Head start. So this Ratzon L'Kabel La'atzmo, it's hu kol kach pagam u'mukulkol. It's a terrible thing. It's literally, he told us in the past, it's the literal opposite. It's 180 degrees difference from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eich yatsa v'haya b'machshavas habriya be'en sof Baruch Hu. So how does this come out, and how does this express, and how does it exist within the machshavas habriya, within the intent behind creation? Shalach duso ein higa umila lefarsha. How can it be that this rift exists within the Or Ein Sof, where the Or Ein Sof contains also this negativity, given that the achdus of the Or Ein Sof, the unity of the Or Ein Sof, the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which the Rambam tells us and others tell us has to be the same as HaKadosh Baruch Hu itself, because there are no parts. There's just unity. So the Ratzon Hashem is the same as Hashem itself. So how can it be that the Ratzon Hashem, which includes this thing that is opposite the midah of Ratzon Lahashbos, this Ratzon L'Kabel La'atzmo, this Mukulkol, this awful thing, self-interested thing, literally the opposite of God. He's told us many, many times that God is by definition no Ratzon L'Kabel, because who in the world can God receive anything from? There can't be Ratzon L'Kabel. So how is it in the absolute and total achdus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is indescribable, how can that achdus contain Ratzon L'Kabel? Like, mechanically, how does it work? Logically. He's going to try and explain to us logically how it must exist within the Or Ein Sof, how there must be a Ratzon L'Kabel within the Or Ein Sof, and he's going to try and prove this to us. Okay, but the question is, how can it be? I understand, meaning based on what we said until now, I understand how it works. I understand that the Ratzon L'Kabel is the foundation that then allows me to transform the Ratzon L'Kabel into a Ratzon L'Kabel al Manas Lahashbos, and that's good. That's a good process. So really, the Ratzon L'Kabel is not as bad as we thought it was, right? Meaning the Tov of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the goodness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is not impunged by the existence of the Ratzon L'Kabel, because at the end of the day, it's part of the mechanism by which things get to where they need to go. It's part of the plan. But how can it be part of the plan? How can the plan consist of opposite parts? If there are no parts, there can't be parts. There can't be opposites within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the premise of the question is, okay? Ve'inyan and the explanation of this is as follows: Ki be'emes tekef b'machshava livro es haneshamos. The truth is that immediately when there's an intent, a thought within God, so to speak, to create the neshamos, Haisa machshavaso yisbarach goremes hakol. That machshava, that thought, automatically affects, with an A, affects everything that it thought. Ki eino tzarech l'kli ma'isa kamonu. Because God doesn't need tools to turn thought into product. I can conceive of an idea, and then there's a giant gap between the thing that I've conceptualized and the actualization of that thing. I decide I want to build a house. I have to gather materials, and I have to gather tools, and I have to find a place to build it. There are so many things that have to happen. There's time that has to pass. There's space that has to be traversed. There are materials that exist outside myself that connect my thought to the thing that I'm trying to create and connect me to the finished byproduct. All of that has to be put together, and everything has to come together in order to turn thought into reality. But with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's not the case. Nothing exists outside of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all already there. My thought, right, the building materials for my house are outside of me. And so I need to go get them. I have to go to Home Depot. The plans for the house, I have an idea in my head, but like the actual blueprints, those have to exist, and those are much more detailed than what I have in my head. The building site is a piece of land that doesn't exist within me, so I either have to, maybe I own it already and I have to walk there, or I have to acquire it, and I have to prepare it for the et cetera, et cetera. These are all things outside of myself. But when it comes to God, immediately when God thinks, I'm going to create, that thought includes everything that creation consists of. God's thoughts are not incomplete. Ani Hashem lo shanisi. So I don't start with a germ of a thought. God doesn't start with a germ of a thought and then the thought develops and develops and develops. And God doesn't change. God is eternal. God is static. The Ein Sof is complete static. It's not changing. So the thought itself consists of the totality of everything that is entailed by that thought. Everything is contained within that kernel. So immediately what happens, everything that was thought into being immediately becomes into being. Every person, and additionally, all of the reality and all of the world and all of the existence and all of the creations that God thinks immediately come into being. In addition, everything that is good and all of the pleasure that God thinks and wants to provide for all of these creations also immediately comes into being. Poof, like that. There's no gap between, I want everyone to enjoy the most good in the world. Okay, so I'm going to create them broken, and now they're going to get good. And that's how they're going to get good. No, that's not how it works. I thought good. I thought pleasure for creation. Oh, it's happening already, immediately. There's no gap between the thought and the reality. Im kol tachlis shleimusan hasofis shanashamas atitus lakabel b'gemar tikun, as well as the purpose, the completion of the purpose, the end goal that all of the neshamos are supposed to receive at the end of their tikkun, right? When they get to where they're supposed to go in the machshavas habriya. The machshavas habriya was what? Was Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahanos l'nivrav. Well, if God wants to give good to his creatures, they're already getting good. There's no gap. They're already it's already happening immediately. They're at the same time that they come into being, they're already there. It happens all at once. There's no time. There's no space to traverse. There are no stages of development to wait out and to see things play out the way they're supposed to. There are no things that I have to orchestrate and put together in order to make it happen, because my thinking makes it real. I imagine it and it's real immediately. Meaning that immediately upon the machshava that I want, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I want X, immediately X comes into being, including the fact that the neshamos are going to receive their ultimate tikkun, which is the transformation of their Ratzon Lakabel into a Ratzon Lakabel al Manas Lahashbos. A total transformation of the neshamos of creations into the tsura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the receiving of the ultimate goodness that exists, that happens all immediately. Not even in an instant. It just happens immediately as it's thought into being. This he quotes from the Zohar in Mishpatim. I don't have it in front of me, but the Zohar effectively says that everything happens immediately. All the higher, right, the Elyonim and Tachtonim automatically come into being. Immediately when the Machshava behind the Bria is thought into being, everything immediately appears. This is possibly, I don't know if this is true or not, but it occurs to me that this is possibly the idea that Adam Harishon and Moshe, while up on Har Sinai, see Me Sofa Olamad Sofa. Everything is laid out immediately, in all one fell swoop. There's no transfer, there's no traversing time, space, development, etc., etc. It's just there because you're experiencing or seeing it all as it is in the mind of God. And go for it.
Thanks. Sorry, I have a question about this. All right, so
I have no answers, but I'll try.
If there's no time, I'm not sure why no time equates to final form, as opposed to infinite form. You know what I'm saying? Like in that midrash that you just cited, it feels in a way like almost more intuitive, right? You see everything. Doesn't mean like you see the final picture, the final snapshot. And here we seem to be focusing on that end result.
I don't think I'm probably misspeaking because I don't know how to really express these things. But I think what he's saying is not that we're focused on end result, but that whatever the end is, sof maaseh b'machshava tchila, I mean, whatever the end is going to be is already here at the beginning.
The way I see it, what you're saying is there's no gap between thought and act. And since therefore there's no gap between thought and act,
there's no act
is completed. The mechanism itself is already in existence as soon as the thought exists.
The actualization.
Okay, but HaSulam, you're saying that. Oh, sorry.
Go. Sorry.
So you're saying that also in Ashlag, or there is this sort of sense of infinite simultaneous smear, or this is not a nice word, but like, hopefully you get what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah. I guess.
Yeah.
I think
right, because so I think the next line kind of helps. Maybe it helps. I don't know. For me, it helps. He says v'hu meitam, and this is all because kibenetz chiyuso yisbarach ha'avar va'atid va'hava mishamshim ke'echad. Because within the internality of God, right? Again, within the internality of God, not from our perspective, but within God's eternality, there's no past, present, and future are all happening immediately, all at once. Does that help? Is that? It's a better way of saying it, I think.
Yeah, it's just once you say that, then it's not like we're jumping right to the happy ending.
Right. We're not jumping. We're not. Great. It's already there.
I think it's a really beautiful image, but I had to look back at the forward, and he published it in 1945, and it just feels so difficult. I mean, I have trouble with this theology. It shows up in many other places that like ultimately everything's for a reason. Everything will turn out good. And publishing that in 1945 is shocking. It's
well, just so like. Does this, if everything is simultaneous, right? Like you say, we didn't jump to the happy ending. The happy ending is already here, but it's not like the Holocaust already here, right? Because everything.
Right, the Holocaust is not a happy ending.
No, but we're not. Oh, okay, but then I didn't understand the answer to my question, right? Why, how could it be winnowed out what is process and what is result? If we were like, ultimate result, what is that? That could be the thing that exists, and why would that not be other elements of a personal history or a cosmic history?
So, so let's say I don't know. I don't know if this is correct, but maybe we can say like this. Let's take an individual. Let's take me, for example, right? I'm born. I go through life. I go through all kinds of ups and downs, successes and failures, hard work on myself, giving up on myself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at a certain point, I reach whatever it was I was supposed to reach, and I die. Right? Let's assume I get there. Let's assume I get to what I'm supposed to get to. And maybe it's possible I die without getting there, but let's assume I got to what I'm supposed to get to. So from my perspective, I have had an experience of infancy, childhood, young adulthood, so on and so forth, growth, development, ups, downs, ratzon lakabel la'atzmo, development of a ratzon lahashbos, the gradual like integration of the two and development of a ratzon lakabel manas lahashbos, and now nirvana, right? Whatever, right? From God's perspective, of course, that sequence of events is not a sequence of events.
That's fine, but does it not exist at all except for the nirvana?
No,
No. I think you're just talking about God, not about us. We don't, everything doesn't fall into place in a complete mechanism for us. We have to run through that mechanism, but for God, it's all existing immediately.
right, but from God's perspective, the beginning and the downs and the ups and the process and the development exist just as much as the end.
Hence the eternal Shoah thing.
They don't exist in temporal sequence, I think, or maybe they do, but exist all in the same moment.
At the same time, yeah.
Right. I mean, no time, but yeah, right. Like
same time, no time.
They're all simultaneously present, even though from our perspective it takes time for them to unfold. From God's perspective, they are all simultaneously present. Each and every part of that development is simultaneously present in the present.
Right. So then, no matter how much distance we get from the Shoah, it's still always cosmically in front of God.
But also, even for Jews, we see this in lots of places. Like we should see that we went out from Egypt at every moment. We should see that we're at Sinai. We should be looking forward to redemption at every moment. Like I think there's also like a Jewish value of collapsing time in our minds also.
For sure.
That's the goal. I don't know if I live that.
No, but we have multiple mitzvos. I think that for which that is true. Where we're asked to place ourselves outside of linear time, and we relive past moments in the present, right? Ideally, Pesach and Tisha B'av should be experienced as Pesach and Tisha B'av now. As they were 2,000, 3,500 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. It's happening now, which I think I think it's not a coincidence then that you find, for example, also in Sifrei Kabbalah and Sifrei Hasidus, that the idea that, sure, Moshe is a historical figure, but that's not really the important part about Moshe. Moshe is happening right now. In each and every one of us, there's Moshe playing out. There's Moshe and Paro playing out at every moment in each one of us. Can we identify it? That takes a lot of sensitivity, and we can try and identify it, but it's happening. Akedas Yitzchak is happening because all of these, it's not just, it's an event that happened, and the event was a cause, and now there are effects of the cause, and there's a Chet Egel and we're answering for it forever and things like that. Or there's a Chet Tzadas and we're answering for it forever. Yeah, that's true also from our perspective. And from a higher perspective, we can transcend that Gashmi perspective, that time-bound Olam Hasiya, Olam Hazeh perspective. It's right now. And it's a true thing in the present in addition to it being a true thing in the past. Maybe. Okay. But the point, just as a building block, I mean, again, this is why I said I find at least these next several paragraphs, for me personally, I find them hard to like work through, and figure out what he's doing. But the building block for now that I think he's setting up for us is he's already set up for us in the past several paragraphs that there's a process that takes place. Now he's explaining to us that process that takes place, that existence of a pure Yetzer Hara, of a Ratzon Makabel, which is gradually transformed over time in our experience of this world into a Ratzon Makabel Amanas Lahashbos, which is the effect of Hishtavos Hatsura and now connection and Devekus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and receiving all of the Tov that was in store for us and that was intended for us and that God wants us to receive. That is a process that we experience. And at the very same time, because that's part of what God wants to unfold, it's all happening in an instant from God's perspective, or it's all happening at once. But all of the parts are happening at once. They're all happening, but they're all happening collapsed into one. There's no need for time. There's no need for things have to unfold. There's no need for, I plant a seed and I have to wait 6 weeks for it to germinate, and then I have to wait 3 months to have a vegetable. That doesn't happen from God's perspective. Umitamza. Now, from God's perspective, though, using the seed analogy, from God's perspective, though, God's Ratzon includes there are seeds. Seeds germinate. Seeds sprout. Seeds grow bigger. They flower. They develop into vegetable. The vegetable grows. The vegetable ripens, and now you pick it and eat it. From God's perspective, those are all aspects of the Ratzon Hashem. If they weren't, they wouldn't happen that way in our world. But because they're all parts of those are all aspects or expressions of the Ratzon Hashem, and the Ratzon Hashem itself is above time and indivisible and totally unified. From God's perspective, all of those aspects of the Ratzon are happening at the same time, or at once. Again, I don't know how to say it without using the word time, but we shouldn't use the word time for it. Umitamzeh, and for this reason, Lo haya klal inyan haratzon makabel hamokulkol betzura de peruda be'en sof baruch hu. And for this reason, the Ratzon Makabel, full terrible Ratzon Makabel, which is the absence, the absence, the header of the essence of what a Kadosh Baruch Hu is, which is a Ratzon Makabel. It doesn't exist in any separate sense within the Ar Ein Sof. Elo lahepech, on the contrary, she'osa hashvas hatzura hatida legalos b'gemar tikun hofia tekef b'nitzchiyus yosbarach. On the contrary, the alignment of Tzura, the transformation of Ratzon Lakabel into Ratzon Lakabel Amanash Lahashbos, in and of itself, which will eventually happen, in and of itself is already fully and totally expressed and present within the eternality of God itself from the get-go. There's not a separate Ratzon Lakabel that exists on its own, and then that Ratzon Lakabel exists, and then it is fought against, and then it is transformed and captured and repurposed and so on and so forth. From our perspective, that's what it looks like. But from God's perspective, the Ratzon Lakabel was never a separate thing from God that existed as an opposing part within God, so to speak, from the get-go. It was never separate because at the very same time that there's Ratzon Lakabel, the Ratzon Lakabel is already in this state of tikkun. And they're both true at the same time. Va'al sod hazeh amru Chazal, and this is the idea that we find in Pirkei Rav Elazar. Kodem shenivra olam hayahu ushmo echad. Before the world is created, hu ushmo echad, God and God's name, so to speak, Hu, the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and his name, which is all of the full expression and forms and ways we encounter, relate to, reference God through our experience of God, all of them are echad. They're all one. There's no difference between them. There's no difference from God's perspective between God before Tzimtzum and God after Tzimtzum. There's no difference from God's perspective between God as Sovet Kol Almin and Mamala Kol Almin. There's no difference from God's perspective as Bilti Gvul or Besocha Gvul. From God's perspective, there's no difference from God's perspective between God as Or Ein Sof and God as infinite little beings and creatures that exist within our world and forces and phenomena and so on and so forth, right? Shemo. They're one and the same from God's perspective. And the way the way he's reading this Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar is the reason why that's so is because of this collapse of time that exists within the Or Ein Sof. Because once there's an Or Ein Sof, and now there's a myriad of creation. But if we collapse time, then actually these things are not separate things from each other. And they all fall together into one thing. Think.
I'm just trying to explain, I think, God's unity, despite the fact he has different parts and different processes, because he's out of time. He's not within time like we are.
So right. So all of those parts and all of those processes, all of those expressions, which we experience as functions of time, right? Rabbi Nassim talks about this. Reuven, we actually learned this piece in the Likutei Halachos a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating idea that's based on Rabbi Nachman, but Rabbi Nachman I think really develops it much deeper, where he makes the point that time is really the essence of tzimtzum. Time is the very first thing that breaks the unity of God, because there's before Tzimtzum and after Tzimtzum. There's before the Beis Bereshis and after the Beis Bereshis. There's the point of which there's only Or Ein Sof, and now there's something else. So time is really that first duality that we experience, or that exists within reality, he says. And within the Or Ein Sof, of course, that duality collapses. There's no before after. There's no blend.
And of course, we say there's no before or after in Torah, which fits with this whole framework, right?
Nice, yeah.
Mm.
And Muktam Luchar B'Torah, that fits very nicely. Yeah, 100%. Okay, Hatsura de Peruda Shebaratzon Lakabel, because the sense in which the Ratzon Lakabel is separate from Hakadosh Baruch Hu is a split from Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Lo nisgalsa klal b'metzius haneshama sheyatzu b'machshevas habriya. It's not apparent at all within the neshama that emerge from the original machshavas habriya, the original intent behind creation. Elahein hayudavukos bo b'ashvas hatzura, because the neshamos are totally davuk with Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'hishtavas hatzura besod hu ushmo achad, prior to creation. So there's no pirud. Now, really, ayin b'talmud eser sfiras chelek aleph. Okay, so and really, what he's I think. At the end of the day, I think what this really ends up having to boil down to is we're getting back to something which then at some point sort of just becomes inexplicable. But right, what he's saying is that this hishtavus, that this ratzon lakabel, which once it exists is a pirud and the opposite of the ratzon lahashbos, which is the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not separate from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because since the Ratzon Lakabel is a function of the creation of neshamos, but neshamos before they're created, which already exist within the Or Ein Sof, can't possibly actually be separate from the Or Ein Sof by definition. So somehow this Ratzon Lakabel, which exists, or the Machshava for it exists, which also has to be miyuchad within the Or Ein Sof prior to its being created, it can't be separate by definition. It's not separate. I think we end up having to fall back to an inexplicable paradox at the end of the day, but the collapse of time thing gets us most of the way there, without having to resort to paradox. I think.
Yeah.
He explains. he explains this a little bit better. So he sends us to Talmud Eser Sfiros, where I think actually he does help us a little bit and explain this a little bit better. I just wanted to.
The one assumption that I think is worth naming is that like he assumes that ultimately every neshama will be metukan, like that like ultimately every soul is going to go through this process and stop being pure routes on the Kabbal and start being routes on the Kabbal, which like that's kind of, he like takes that for granted, and then once you say that, then you can collapse time and say ultimately every soul is going to turn out for good, but you need that piece in order to make it all work, right?
Will every soul end up that way?
That piece.
I know God is that way.
I mean, I think that piece is necessary anyway, because if the machshavas habriya is lehetiv lenivrav, so then by default it has to be that all the nivra, like everything that exists within creation, is going to be to receive all of the hatava and all of the tov. It's inevitable.
And in order to receive that tov, it has to
have a ratzon l'kabel.
And the hashba, Almanas the hashba, right?
Kabel has to
it has to ultimately get to that higher level.
Right. Otherwise, you're not receiving the ultimate good. You're receiving what, right? Right. Steak is nice, but godliness is better. So if I'm not going to get to godliness, then you haven't really fulfilled your purpose of like giving me the ultimate goodness.
Yeah. So, but I'm sorry. Are you implying that we will all achieve that?
Yes, inevitably. That's I mean that's what
all human beings. All of us really will. Okay, I'm glad to hear it.
Maybe not.
Right, this is where you have to talk about Goguling, right? Like, the souls will ultimately all achieve it.
Oh, the soul, yeah, because it seems like a challenge.
No, but also maybe not maybe not entirely in the ways that we expect. You see this talked about in certain ways with respect to some of the ideas around Mashiach and Mashiach having to be forced at a certain point. And Mashiach having to be right. Meaning, if Mashiach is a person, I don't think this is such an interesting discussion. But if Mashiach is a process or a state of consciousness, and when the world reaches a state of consciousness of everyone, right? Someone give me the pasuk from the end of Mishnah Torah. The whole
like a generation that's
yes,
that's all bad and all good. I can look.
Everyone will know.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Whatever the exact wording of the pasuk is. I don't want to misquote it. But that is if that is the end goal and that is Yemos HaMashiach, then that is the ultimate tikkun, right? Meaning Mashiach happens, Achros Yam happens. Certainly, this is true in the Leshem and in others as well. But Mashiach is the result of the Leshem has a beautiful way of pointing us at this idea. We'll digress for just a second. The Leshem, harps on this idea that the Arizal, when he describes the kav that enters into the chalal hapanu that's created by the tzimtzum, the Arizal emphasizes that this kav doesn't go all the way to the bottom it doesn't go all the way through the chalal hapanu, right? The tzimtzum creates a circular chalal hapanu or spherical chalal hapanu, an empty space within which all reality is going to exist. That's devoid or seemingly devoid of the Or Ein Sof. And then the Or Ein Sof reintroduces a kav of Or Ein Sof back in, a measured kav of Or Ein Sof back in to create everything. That kav doesn't go all the way through this sphere. It goes down close to the bottom, but not all the way through. And the Leshem develops this idea that he says, well, yeah, it doesn't go all the way through, but what history is pushing it further. The Arizal tells us that the kav doesn't go all the way through, because if the kav went all the way through, then you'd have Or Ein Sof coming from the top, Or Ein Sof coming up from the bottom, because it's penetrated all the way through to the Or Ein Sof that's outside of the sphere, outside of the chalal. And now there's no top and there's no bottom. There's no beginning. There's no end, because it's the oh my gosh, it's the, what's it called that runs through a circle? It's the come on. The
diameter.
It's the diameter running all the way through the circle. There's no top and no bottom of a diameter, because the circle has no top and has no bottom. The only way you have a beginning and an end, or a top and a bottom, up and down, good and bad, etc., is when the kav begins at one point and goes into the chalal, but doesn't go all the way through. So now wherever it ends is the bottom, right? That's the end of the light. So that's the bottom, so to speak. But the Leshem says that and that's why we have a world that we exist in, which is, first of all, physical, where God is not fully present, or seems not fully present, or not fully revealed and apparent, and a world that seems full of lots of bad stuff, because we have a space, we exist within a space that is not fully and totally enraptured with the totality of the full force of the Ein Sof, because it only comes in one end, and it's limited. And the Leshem tells us Mashiach, the point of Mashiach, or the point of Achros Hayamim, is our avodah is constantly pushing that kav further and further down the challah. And eventually we're going to break through. When we break through, everything is reflooded with Ein Sof, back to the beginning, all over again. Except now it's back to the beginning, it's Ein Sof after there's already been a physical reality and a chalal and a tachtonim. So now there's dira b'tachtonim. There wasn't tachtonim before. There was only potential tachtonim, but now there's realized tachtonim, which are now reflooded with the Ein Sof, and that's Mashiach, that's Achros Hayamim. That can happen in one of two ways. And he describes this also when he describes Yetzias Mitzrayim. It can happen one of two ways. Either we're pushing the kav down because we're growing and we're seeing more, right? So we're so to speak, through our own consciousness and our expanded consciousness, filling the chalal more and more and more with more Ein Sof, because we're seeing what's there. Or we're not, and someone's going to have to punch it through so that we're forced to see it. That's what happens at Yetzias Mitzrayim, because we're not at a point where we can see anything, right? Mikotzer Ruach, we can't even hear Moshe telling us that we're gonna leave. And if we didn't leave at that moment, b'chafezon, immediately, we would have been stuck there forever, because we never would have been able to see anything ever again. And so God has to take us out like that immediately. I mean, he has to force it through. And so Mashiach can come in the nice way, or Mashiach can come in the bad way. Every neshama can get to its tachlis of tikkun shleimus, of transforming ratzon l'kabel into ratzon l'kabel amanas lahashbos through gradual work and development. And sometimes it has to come through some sort of unfortunate, nasty something that just totally jars us and rattles our brains and shifts our perspective, not because we worked to get there, but because you shattered everything else we saw in the past, which is not so pleasant. It's the pleasant way of Mashiach or the unpleasant way of Mashiach, the cataclysmic apocalypse type of Mashiach, which will shift our perspective by definition, because everything is going to just shatter, or the nice way, which will be much more pleasant. But it happens. It's going to happen. That's if it was intended to happen, then it has to happen, because, and indeed from God's perspective, it's already happened, or the happening has already happened, and it's all collapsed into one. But from our perspective, if we're not there yet, if we don't feel like we're there yet, it's going to happen eventually, because if it's part of the machshavas habriya, then how can it not happen? There's no gap between God willing it and it happening. It perforce happen, right? Baruch she'amar v'haya olam. You said it and it happened. There's no gap. So I think Jeremy is totally correct on that. That's a super it's a fantastic point. It has to happen, which is also amazing. It's going to happen for all of us, somehow, in some way, shape, or form. Okay. So let's see. I just wanted. Okay. Okay. So I just wanted to read a small little bit from Talmud Esed Sfiros that I think maybe helps clarify or explain or expand a little bit of what he's trying to say here, which I think is worthwhile. So he says at the beginning of Talmud Esed Sfiros, where the Arizal says, it's interesting. The Arizal frames this differently or Rav Chaim Vital frames this differently in Eitz Chaim and Otros Chaim. In Otros Chaim, it seems that the language makes a little bit more sense, and this question doesn't arise. But in the language in Eitz Chaim, he says as follows. He says that Marachu, Rav Chaim Vital says that you should know, Terem Shenetzla and Etzal and the Nivra and Ivram, before anything was expressed and anything was created, and Pashid B'Malik Kol Metzias. There was an Or Elyon, a simple Or Elyon, the Or Ein Sof, Memale Kol HaMetzius, that filled all reality. So the Baal HaSulam and others, of course, ask the obvious question. He says, L'chora tamua ma'od. This is very strange. It's hard to understand. Halo hamadubar kan al beterem shenivru halamos. We're talking here at this point prior to any creation. The imkain ezu metzias yeshnakan. What metzias, what reality is being filled by the Or Ein Sof? There is no reality. So the language doesn't make sense. Vim kain ezu metzias yeshnakan. Asher Or Ha'elyon Sarach L'maloso. What metzias, what reality, what existence exists such that the Or Ein Sof is filling it. Va'inyan hus, and he explains what's going on. Ki kol ha'olamos v'chol ha'neshamos sheyeshnam va'atidim livros im kol mikrehem ad l'tachlis tikunam hine hem kulam kavar kolulam ba'Ein Sof Baruch Hu. All of the olamos and all of the neshamos and everything that is going to eventually be created in all of their forms and in all of their variations and in all of their developments up until the end point that they're supposed to reach to fulfill the purpose, the machshava, the ratzon that exists within the Or Ein Sof to create them, they're all there already. They're all there already. Others talk about it how they're all there in potential, but they're not actualized. He doesn't even say that. He says they're all there, period. B'chol tifartam uv'chol meloam, not in potential, but in their full expression, in all of their glory and in all of their fullness. Bizesh kasav arav. This is what the Arizal is saying, or this is what Rav Chaim Vital is saying. Asher Or Ha'elyon hanimshach me'atzmusi yisbarach, that the Or Elyon, the Or Ein Sof that's coming from the Atzmos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, haya memale es kol hametzias. It's filling all metzias. Dahainu klalos hametzias shebeikar, klalos hametzias. It's filling all of the generality of all metzias that is going to ever come into being. Umashmiyanu she'Or Ha'elyon haya memale osam legamri ad shelo nishar behem shum makom panashe after lahosip behem shleimus v'tikun kolshu. And when he says that it's filling the entire metzias and there's no empty space, what he's saying is that the Or Ein Sof is already encompassing all of potential reality. There is nothing left to encompass. There's nothing left to develop. There's nothing left unthought or unactualized already within the Or Ein Sof prior to its ever being created. Okay, that's the idea he's trying to get at here, I think. That's what he's trying to get us to in this paragraph as a building block. Okay, so okay, that's what he's trying to get us to. So if that's the case, I don't. It's we're running late, but I think it doesn't make sense to stop before finishing paragraph Yud Daled, because then we just have to do the whole thing over again. So let's just we'll plow ahead for another 10 minutes. Yud Daled. So based on this idea that everything, all the stages of development, everything already exists within the Or Ein Sof in its total fullness, collapsed, past, present, future, beginning, middle, end, all collapsed into one, but all real, meaning not jumping stages, but all of the stages coexisting at one moment in the Or Ein Sof. As a result of that, it's necessary to say that there are three states within which neshamos can exist or do exist. Matzav ha'echad hu matziusan be'Ein Sof Baruch Hu b'machshava sabriya. The first stage, again, first, so to speak, but the first stage is that the neshamos exist within the reality of the Ein Sof, within the thought to have creation, right? Meaning, so there is a sense in which the neshamos exist. There's a thought to create neshamos, to create them in a certain way, for them to go through a certain process, for them to achieve a certain result. And prior to their actually being created, they already exist within that state, but in total unity with the Or Ein Sof, because there's no tzimtzum, there's no time, there's no development, etc. Matzav habez hu, the second stage is mitziusan bebechinas shisa alfei shani. Then there's the existence of these neshamos in an intermediate stage of the 6,000 years of creation. Sheneschalku al yidei beis hamarachos hanizka le'el guf v'lenefesh, which during that time the neshamos that exist are divided into guf and nefesh through the two systems of tahara and klipa, of ratzon makabel and ratzon mahashbos. They express the ratzon Hashem as pure spirituality, neshama, and pure physicality, guf. V'nitna lahen ha'avoda b'torah u'mitzvos k'dei lahafech es haratzon lakabel shebhem. And within this space, within this state of existence, right? This is not a function of time. It's just conceptually this state of existence within which the neshamos exist. At this point, or within this state of existence, the neshamos have Torah and mitzvos that are given to them to engage and work on and practice in order to transform the ratzon lakabel into a ratzon lahashbos. To transform them into having a ratzon lakabel al manas lahashpia to the Creator and not to receive anything for themselves. During this time, there's no tikkun to the guf. The guf is not being mesukan. Rak l'nefashos bilvad. During these 6,000 years where we're working on ourselves, so to speak, through Torah and mitzvos, when we're working on ourselves, the only thing we're ever fixing is our neshama, not our guf. We're transforming our neshama into a ratzon lakabel amanas lahashbos. Or excuse me, we're developing our ratzon lahashbos, our pure spirituality, which is our neshama. But our guf is not being fixed in any way, shape, or form, because what are we doing with our guf while we are here and we exist in guf form? We're suppressing it. Okay, we're stamping it down in order to give expression and develop our ratzon lakabel. In order to develop our ratzon lahashbos, our spirituality, our connection with God, our dveikus, our hishtavas hatzura, we suppress our physicality. We don't fix our physicality. We suppress our physicality. It's chafya rather than it's hafcha. It's kafya, rather than it's hafcha. Koloma shetzrichos levar mikirbam kol bechinas hakabala atzmon. We're trying to eradicate, to burn out all of the ratzon makabel that exists within us. Shehi bechinas haguf. We're trying to destroy our guf. Right? If we're working at this, again, he's describing a phenomenon. Not necessarily. He's not advocating this as a. This is what we should be doing. He's describing the phenomenon that we're destroying the guf of the gufnius. That we're destroying the gashmius of ourselves. And we're trying to leave over just our ratzon lahashbos, just our spirituality, just our neshama. Va'afilu nefashos hatzadikim lo suchlo lis'ane began eden achar petirason ela achar kechlos kol gufan likarev ba'afar. And even tzadikim can't fully experience Gan Eden, despite the fact that they have developed their neshama here, but the guf has to decay. The neshama has to be totally released from its connection to the guf, because the guf is still guf. In our experience in this world, our guf is still guf. Our neshama is elevated to whatever extent we're able to emphasize and grow it and cultivate it, our ratzon lahashbos. We make it bigger and stronger and grow it, but our guf remains a guf, and this is why we die and our body decays and we go up to Gan Eden. And right now
how does this feeling with Kriyat Meitim? I thought the guf is
going to get there. He's going to get there, right? Because remember, at the very beginning, he asked questions about Tchias HaMeisim in particular. He wanted to understand why in Tchias HaMeisim the Midrashim say that we're going to be resurrected with all of our physical blemishes, and then all of our physical blemishes will be healed. Right? So this is why Tchias HaMeisim happens. And this is why the Tchias HaMeisim that happens, it gives us back the body we left with. Because the body we left with isn't fixed yet. It still has to be further fixed. We have to transform our guf now into a ratzon lakabel amanas lahashbos. That's taking the guf and elevating the guf, not just growing the neshama, but actually integrating and elevating the guf. That only happens later. Matzav hagimel hu, and the third stage is gemar hatikun shel neshamos achar tchias hamesim. The third stage in which neshamos exist, the third sense in which they can exist, is the total completion of the neshama after Tchiat HaMesim, she'az yagia hatikun hashalem gam al hagufim, which is when we also get a full tikkun, we're also fully fixing the body. Ki az yahafchu gam es hakabala atzma, shehi tzuras haguf, shetishra alav tzura shel hashva tahora. Now we're transforming. We're not suppressing the guf anymore. We're not growing the spiritual and suppressing the physical. Instead, we're transforming the Ratzon Makabel, the guf itself, into a Ratzon Makabel Amanas Lahashbos. So instead of killing it, we're picking it up and putting it in the right direction. We're turning it in the right direction and sending it off to do what it's supposed to be doing, which is Ratzon Makabel Amanas Lahashbos, which I think really, again, goes back to the essence of we have to transform the tachtonim into expressions and spaces within which the elyonim can find expression. It's not that we have to suppress the physical and destroy the physical world. We're actually supposed to transform the physical world into a merkava l'shchina. The same thing is happening here with the guf, la'achar tchias hamesim. We're taking the physical and we're transforming it into a full merkava l'shchina, not through suppressing it, and elevating our Ratzon Lahashbos, but by actually transforming our Ratzon Makabel La'atzmo into a Ratzon Makabel Al-Minas Lahashbos, which is much more like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nasim ru'im l'kabel la'atzmo kol ha'tov va'oneg va'noam sheb'machshav sabriya, and that's how we really are able to make ourselves able to receive all of the goodness and all of the pleasure that was built into the original intent behind creation. V'im kol zeh yizchu l'dveikus ha'chazaka, and then we achieve very deep, strong dveikus mikoach hishtavas tzurasim liyotzrim, through our real total transformation and alignment of our tzura with that of the Borei. Ki lo yikablu kol zeh mitzad ritzonim l'kabel. We can't ela mitzad ritzonim lashpia nachas ruach liyotzrim, because we're no longer receiving anything in order to receive something for ourselves. Rather, we're only receiving in order to give back and allow God to fulfill the purpose of creation. Sharei yesh lo yisbarach hana shebakabel mimenu, because God is receiving hana from our receiving from Him. So our receiving from Him is only in order to give back to Him, because He likes to give to us, so to speak. So by doing that, we're also mirroring Him. We're mirroring Him, because why does He receive all of the avoda that we give Him? So that He can give to us. And so we're taking everything He gives to us so that we can be giving to Him, because He likes giving to us and we like giving to Him. And now we're all one happy family. But more than one happy family, we're all actually one, right? Real hishtava satsura. This is yichud. ולשם הקיצור אשתמש מכאן ואילך בשמות הגימל מצב מאלו, דהיינו מצב אחד, מצב בייז, מצב גימל, ועד שתזכר כל המספר כאן בכל מצב ומצב. So in order to make this easier to understand, from now on, I'm just going to call these three stages: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Again, just to recap and repeat, and then we'll end because it's very late. But stage 1 is the stage, again, these are not sequential in time. It's very important to understand that. He's not saying that these are sequential in time. He's saying that these are three realities in which the neshama can exist. One reality in which the neshama can exist is in total and absolute yichud with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's stage 1, where the neshama has already achieved what it's trying to achieve. Right, mitziyusan be'ein sof baruch hu b'machshavas habriya shekvar yesh lam tzura ha'atida shel gemar hatikun. That's stage 1. Stage 1 is, right, the point before which God like carves the neshama from under the kisei hakavod, so to speak. Right, that's stage 1. Stage 2 is the stage in which we're doing all the work. We are a guf. We are a neshama, or the neshama exists within a guf and is bound up with a guf, and the two coexist with each other. And there's work to be done, and there's a ratzon lakabel to be fought against, and there's a ratzon lahashbos to be built up, a yetzer tov to be elevated, and a yetzer hara to be suppressed. And that's a different way of existing. That's a different way of existing. It's not a way of yichud. It's a way of conflict. There's a conflict going on between the guf and the neshama, and that's a certain way in which the neshama exists. And the third stage in which the neshama exists is when there is a guf, but that guf is transformed. That's stage 3. The guf is transformed into Ratzon L'Kabel Amanas Lahashbos, because the definition of guf, remember, is Ratzon L'Kabel. But now there's a guf that's being used as a Merkav L'Shchina, as a tool for Ratzon Lahashbos, a Ratzon L'Kabel Amanas Lahashbos, the guf transformed into a vehicle for giving back to God by the guf receiving totally in order to give back, because God likes to give to us. So we give him something by taking from him. And that's stage 3, or that's sense 3, in which the neshama exists in a different way. So one is without any separation, stage 1. One is total separation and therefore conflict. And stage 3 is the transformation of that separation into a higher reality. Those 3 stages. Next, in paragraph 15, he's then going to explain to us and get back to the original point, which was, okay, fine. Now, how do I understand the existence of a Ratzon L'Kabel as something that's indistinct from that's separate or different from the essence of what God is? How can it exist within God's unity? He'll explain to us. He'll start to explain that to us in paragraph 15. But I think for now, we definitely have to stop because it's 9:10. I have to stop. Okay. Have a good night. Thank you for the lovely discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
Good night.